Hello and welcome to Books to Read. D is for Diaries. I'm planning to present 10 of the world's greatest diarists in date order. In the previous episode of this series I presented diary entries from Samuel Pepys and James Boswell, and you can see that episode in the info cards above. In this episode I present the diary entries of Arthur Christopher Benson and Noel. Arthur Christopher Benson lived from 1862 to 1925 and was the son of E. W. Benson, Archbishop of Canterbury, and the brother of the novelist E. F. Benson, author of the Map and Lucia series of novels. Arthur was Master of Magdalen College, Cambridge. He was a prolific author, wrote many volumes of biography, family reminiscences, criticism and verses, including Land of Hope and Glory. His diary, amounting to some 5 million words, starts in 1897 and ends in 1925. Extracts were first published in 1926. Here is his entry for the 5th of April 1903, on which day he met the poet A.C. Swinburne for the first time. Swinburne was 66 years old at the time. There stood before me a little pale, rather Don-like man, quite bald, with a huge head and dome-like forehead, a ragged red beard in odd whisks, a small aquiline red nose. He looked supremely shy, but received me with a distinguished courtesy, drumming on the ground with his foot and uttering strange little whistling noises. He seemed very deaf. The room was crammed with books, bookcases all about, a great sofa entirely filled with stacked books, books on the table. He bowed me to a chair. Will you sit? On the fender was a pair of brown socks. What's Dunton said to me, he's just come in from one of his long walks, and took up the socks and put them behind the coal scuttle. Stay, said Swinburne, and took them out carefully, holding them in his hand. They are drying. What's Dunton murmured something about his fearing they would get scorched, and we sat down. Swinburne sat down, concealing his feet behind a chair, and proceeded with strange motions to put the socks on out of sight. He seems to be changing them, said Watts Dunton. Swinburne said nothing, but continued to whistle and drum. Then he rose and bowed me down to lunch, throwing the window open. Here is his entry for the 25th of October 1904. At this date he was a master at Eton College. My delight in my present quiet life with its sedate occupations, my intense sense of freedom in getting rid of the people, the talk, the scurrying to and fro, my deficiency of vague geniality, my dislike of occasions and formal appearances, all these seem to unfit me, or rather to subtract the zest which ought to be inseparable from good work. I could not, I think, give up my literary occupations. And here is his entry for the 1st of November 1904. Well, I like solitude and books and simple life more and more. I would willingly give up all these pomps and vanities if I could but do what I feel I could do, if only I could just get on the right lines, write a beautiful book which should help and satisfy people. I can express what I mean, and I have some real thoughts, but I can't quite find the medium. It is interesting that he published his most successful and helpful book of essays From a College Window in 1906. This was in part due to turning down the opportunity of becoming the headmaster of Eton and returning to Cambridge as a fellow. Here is his entry for the 31st of December 1904. I've had lots of little worries, but the great strain is gone. The tension that pulled at one's heart, the thought of the old slavery, the fussy, fretting days, the running hither and thither, the scramble, the weariness, and what made it far worse, the purposelessness of so much. That was what knocked the bottom out of much of the Eton life for me. Well, all that is gone. After leaving Eton and becoming a Fellow of Magdalen College, Cambridge, Benson recorded the following in his diary entry dated the 17th of August 1905. I reflect that since I left Eton, in addition to all my work on the Queen's letters, Benson was editing Queen Victoria's letters, I have written the following books. 1. Cambridge Revisited, not published. 2. Fitzgerald, 62,000 words. 3. Upton Letter, 80,000. 4. College Window, 40,000. 5. Pater, 60,000. 6. Leonard, afterward called Beside Still Water, 60,000. 7. My Poetry Lectures, quite a book, 50,000. 8. The Thread of Gold, 80,000. 9. Enough essays and articles to form a small volume by themselves, 40,000. 10. I have published a volume of poetry. It is a long list, yet I'm not at all a hard worker, only a very regular one. Noel lived from 1899 to 1973. He was born in Middlesex in England, the son of a piano salesman. He was encouraged by his mother to make a career of the theatre. Renowned for his comic talent, he wrote a plethora of popular plays, including Hay Fever in 1925, Private Lives in 1933, and Blithe Spirit in 1941. He also wrote the screenplay of the hit wartime film Brief Encounter in 1944. In the 60s he had a new lease of life as a cabaret artiste. His diaries, which cover his life from 1941 to 1969, raise name-dropping to a high art. Here is his entry for the 9th of June 1956, in which he has lunch with Sir Winston Churchill and others. On Thursday, Edward and I drove to Rockbroom to lunch with Emily Reeves, Churchill's overseas literary agent, Wendy Russell, the most fascinating lady, Winston Churchill, Sarah, Churchill's daughter, and Winston's secretary. The lunch was a great success, particularly from my point of view, for it seems from later reports that I was charming, witty, brilliant, etc. What I really was profoundly interested. There was this great man, historically one of the greatest our country has produced, domestically one of the silliest, absolutely obsessed with a senile passion for Wendy Russell. He followed her about the room with his brimming eyes and wobbled after her across the terrace, staggering like a vast baby of 2 who was just learning to walk. He was extremely affable to me, and standing back to allow me to go into a room before him, he pointed to a Toulouse-Lautrec printing of a shabby prostitute exposing cruelly and cynically a naked bottom, flaccid and creased, and said in a voice dripping with senile prurience, "Very appetizing." This really startled me. To begin with, I doubt if Lautrec had ever for an instant intended it to be alluring, and the idea of the saviour of our country calling it appetizing once more demonstrated his extraordinary flair for choosing the right word. I'm convinced that appetizing was what he really thought it. I reflected on the way home how dangerous an enemy repressed sex can be. I doubt if during the whole of his married life Winston Churchill has ever been physically unfaithful to Lady Churchill, but oh, what has gone on inside that dynamic mind! This impotent passion for Wendy Russell is, I suppose, the payoff. Sex heading its ugly rear at the age of 83, waiting so long, too long. It was disturbing, laughable, pitiable, and to me most definitely shocking. I forgave the old man his resolute enmity of years then and there. He, the most triumphant man alive, after all, has lived much less than I. Here is his entry for the 19th of January 1959. The evening finished with a blonde lady, French, pounding the piano and everyone getting a trifle high. Princess Saxe Bourbon was definitely shocked when the Duke of Windsor and I danced a sailor's hornpipe and the Charleston, but there was no harm in it, perhaps a little sadness and nostalgia for him, and for me a curious feeling of detached amusement, remembering how beastly he had been to me and about me in our earlier years when he was Prince of Wales and I was beginning. Had he danced the Charleston and hornpipe with me then, it would have been an accolade to cherish. As it was, it looked faintly ridiculous to see us skipping about with a will. The princess needn't have been shocked. It was merely pleasantly ridiculous. Here is his entry for the 17th of January 1965. Winston Churchill, I fear, is dying at this very moment. I suppose it's just as well, really. 90 years is a long, long time. Personally, I would rather not wait until the faculties begin to go. However, that must be left in the hands of the one above, and I hope he'll do something about it and not just sit there. Sir Winston died a week later on the 24th of January, and Coward died at the age of 73. And now, here's a quick recap, and I'll be back soon with another BookTube video.